Good morning, veterans, faculty, and students. He volunteered for the Army in 1942. As part of the 4th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron, his troop took part in the D-Day invasion and the battles of the Hurtgen Forest and the Battle of the Bulge before occupying Germany in 1945. He's been around for a long time and has seen America go to war 6+ times. I'd like to introduce my father, 95 years old, and the grandfather of York freshman Jillian Sussman, World War II veteran Marvin Sussman.
Veterans, students, faculty, family, and friends, I'm honored to take part in this tribute to Americans who were killed or wounded in our wars, and to all survivors. Recognition of their sacrifice is our duty and a fundamental act of patriotism. This Sunday morning will mark 100 years since the end of World War I, a war that nobody wanted but stumbled into. It was perhaps one of the most vicious of all wars for those in uniforms because of the 4 years of being slaughtered as never before by machine guns and artillery, poison gas and bayonets, deaths from airplanes, and influenza. To fully understand this tragedy, students should read All Quiet on the Western Front, a war novel written by a German soldier who was wounded 5 times. And one of the results of World War I was, in effect, its continuation as World War II, with even more slaughter, especially of civilians, even more than those in uniform. When a nation goes to war, a number of its citizens must offer their lives to defend it. When one promises to obey all orders without hesitation, it is a serious promise that must be kept, even when death may be the most likely result of obeying an order. The probability of death for those in combat is daunting. My A Troop of the 4th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron, in 11 months of combat from D-Day Normandy to Germany's surrender, lost 36 dead out of 140 men at full strength. That's about 1 trooper out of 4. Relative to this audience, it would be like losing the entire senior class. And almost all members of the other classes would go home with wounds, sometimes severe and permanent. That sounds like a terribly high cost, but it was actually about a normal loss rate for such a combat unit. In England, before the invasion, we were told that the Army was prepared to replace 1/2 of every frontline platoon. Of course, when our Air Force loses a plane, the entire crew must be replaced. And for some unlucky infantry and Marine units, relative to this audience, only the senior class would go home, and the other 3 classes would not. To demand such loyalty from its citizens, the leaders of a nation must be certain that the war they undertake is necessary. As Shakespeare said, the king's cause must be spotless. And when our nation is the one invading another nation, our leaders must be especially certain that the war is necessary and that there is no other course, because otherwise the leaders will lose the trust of its citizens and damage the public's morale and the nation's unity. I am a veteran of World War II, which has been called a good war or a just war because it was obviously defensive, while our more recent wars have raised doubts about their necessity. But whether our wars are just or unjust, there is no reason to blame or disrespect our veterans who responded to their nation's call to serve in their armed forces. A nation needs citizens who will always offer their lives when asked. Military service is the necessary burden placed upon a democratic people. But an unjust war has grave consequences. On Chicago's Milwaukee Avenue, just a few steps from the corner of Cicero Avenue and Irving Park Road, you can find the National Veterans Art Museum. You should Google that name for the address and pay it a visit. There, war veterans display their paintings and sculptures portraying their memories, their fears, their nightmares. When you talk to Vietnam veterans, they may explain one fear, that their war may have been unnecessary, that they killed without a valid reason to kill, that they were misled by their own leaders. They have good reasons for that fear. At the end of World War II, in the fall of 1945, my cavalry squadron was camped near Marseille, France, waiting for a ship to take us home. Visiting Marseille on a pass, I watched American jeeps and armored cars being loaded onto a ship in the harbor. A worker told me that the ship was bound for a place the French called Indochine, Indochina, a former French colony taken by the Japanese army during the war. Later, I learned that the former colony's newly liberated citizens called their nation Vietnam. President Truman was helping newly liberated France retake its former colony. Eventually, France gave up fighting against the guerrilla force, leaving the nation divided into North Vietnam under the guerrillas and South Vietnam. France's puppet regime, eventually protected by American troops, because President Eisenhower feared that a hostile Vietnam would become an ally of China. Actually, Vietnam has a long history of opposition to Chinese domination and is currently at odds with China. So that was the beginning of our 20 years of war with one of the world's poorest nations. Gradually, we became more involved, with millions of soldiers at war on both sides. Eventually, we gave up and left. The result was the death of almost 60,000 Americans and over 2 million Vietnamese, plus the wounded, and the wounds on both sides that will not heal. 20 years after we left Vietnam, former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, who led the struggle for 7 years, published a war memoir titled In Retrospect, in which he admitted that the war was, quote, all wrong, terribly wrong, end quote, and that he should have resigned. Today, Vietnam is led by the same regime that our leaders believed was a major threat. That regime is now one of our best friends on the Pacific Rim and a strong trading partner. In Vietnam, 5 American presidents believed they were following the best course. But the American people were never convinced that the cost of the war in blood and treasure was commensurate with the threat posed by one of the most backward nations on earth. American citizens never understood exactly what their government was doing in Vietnam. Before our nation goes to war, our leaders try to convince us that the war is necessary. There are reports of harm done or harm impending. Are the reports true or are they false? Was there really an attack at Tonkin Bay, or was there just a blip on a radar scope? Did Iraq ever have an atomic bomb? Students of York High School, do you know where and how to find the truth? We are bombarded on all sides by information that we often cannot verify. We are asked to trust our leaders. Almost all of them have motives beyond our knowledge. Students of York High School, it will be your duty as citizens to know and understand what your government is doing. In our democracy, the voters elect the leaders. It is the voters who must be informed and active in choosing the wise leaders who avoid making war veterans unnecessary. Students of York High School, you are responsible for your own political education. You must actively search for journalists who will keep you well informed. If necessary, you must be among the thoughtful and informed citizens that seek communication with citizens of other nations, especially those nations that politicians designate as evil. Maybe some of you here today will become journalists who will report the full story. The journalist must seek the truth. If you need encouragement to seek the truth, go to the National Veterans Art Museum in Chicago, or go to any VA hospital and talk to veterans. They will inspire you to seek the truth. And may you always succeed in learning the truth. Only the truth can save us. Nothing but the truth. I thank